Hello, Brian.
Good
I'm here.
evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm here.
That's great. Looks like we got some other people on too. We'll eventually uh zap out their cameras and their audio in just a little bit, but we'll get everybody in. How was your day?
Oh, good. Fine.
Excellent.
Cold and rainy, but
Yeah, same here. It seems to be coming up the whole coast. We're going to be stuck
yeah,
with it for a little while, I
it
imagine.
looks like.
Yeah, let's see what I can do here. There we go. We're going to continue. Good. So we're getting there. People come wandering in as we go. I start to see more and more people here too. It's going to be a good night. Welcome to Manuscript Monday. It's on a Monday this time because we don't have any holidays. But it's going to be great to see everybody tonight and check in with our special guest speaker. Looking forward to that. Hey, Karen, what's the title of your book? Your banjo book?
That half barbaric twang, the banjo in American popular culture.
But I know I'm thinking Wednesday.
I went looking for it and I couldn't find it, but I
just Karen Linn. It was before I was married.
I got it. Good deal. Okay.
And University of Illinois Press.
Oh, it was. Okay. Good deal.
So it's still in print, 25 years later. I think because there's always a new generation of banjo players.
That's great. That's good. I love it. That's a
so
great.
Like every 2 years or so, I'll get a $50 check.
Yeah, I know. We put our first book on Amazon and we made like 75 cents a copy by the time it was all over. In the beginning, you had to ship it to Amazon and pay for that, and then they took their cut, and hardly anything came back. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, it's fun. Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's been in print for like 25 years now.
That's excellent. That's so cool.
Kind of satisfying.
Yeah, I'm going to mute everybody and then unmute you. Just give me a second to do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you can unmute yourself now. And then you'll be good. And I'm just going to mute everybody as they come in. I should be able to do that. Let's see what this is. We're a little funky tonight. We're using a different format, but we're going to get it all straightened out. We won't lose anything. It might just look a little different than you're used to seeing on a Manuscript Monday, but we're going to get it. We're going to get it together. Looking good. Looking good. I see Carolyn's here. She's your biggest fan, by the way,
Okay. Good. I'm giving I have a script here and I'm giving her a shout out, thanking her.
Excellent. There you go. Brad's here. Hey, Brad, thanks for posting. Always happy you're there to give us a hand.
No problem. Did you notice a spike at all?
I did not, and I don't have the way we're running Zoom tonight. It's a little funky, so I don't get to see that. We'll eventually move on to the Zoom webinar series or pick up the GoToWebinar again, depending upon how the board wants to, where they want to go and what they want to do with it and how much they want to invest in this. And then I'll be able to see kind of instant responses. I just can't do that with the Zoom meeting we have set up tonight, but we'll get there. Look,
yeah,
Pat's
no problem.
hanging out there. Christian, Bonnie's here. Roger's here. Christina and Barton are there. Ellen's our illustrious president is standing by, which is just great. We're going to fire it up at 8 o'clock. I'm going to share my screen in just a little bit. I'm going to put this over here. Put this over here. We will get there. Is that Carolyn's chuckle?
Yep.
Of course it is. There we go. Thanks, Carolyn. This is a great recommendation. We'll just do that. That should work out just fine. Good deal. Well, people will be coming in. We're going to ask people to mute themselves when they come in and turn off their video at some point. We can see Brad. What do you got hanging there, Brad? It's a cool. Is that a mirror in a window frame?
Yeah, it's something my wife wanted for the kitchen here in the dining room.
Oh, nice.
So
looks great. Looks great. Looks great.
Thank you.
Good deal. All
And the
right.
star behind me, that was something my mom had out on our back porch up in South Bend for a long time. So
Oh,
when
no kidding.
when she finally moved into a retirement community, I went ahead and took that. And it's part of our dining room kitchen now.
Nice. Slide to the left or the right so we can see the star.
Oh,
Oh, there you go. Looks like the old Texaco star that we remember from.
yeah, it does kind of.
Yeah. Back in the days when 7 people would come out and change your oil and check your tires and
Yeah,
wipe down your windshields, right?
that's right. You know, when I used to do that when I was like, oh, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, because my dad at the RV business we owned for 70 years, when I was still a little kid, we still sold Sinclair gas at that building.
Oh, no kidding.
And yeah, people would come in and I'd go out and I'd pump their gas and wash their windshield.
Look at that.
And yeah,
Doesn't happen much anymore.
no, it was a long time ago. I bet I was the last person. I've always liked to think I was the last person to do that.
That's too funny. Good
I'll
deal.
bet I was the last kid to do it.
Yeah, more than likely. That's too good.
So,
Good deal.
yeah,
All right, we're going to fire this up, Brad. I'm going to turn your video off if you don't mind, and
okay.
I'll mute you as well. And then we're going to get things going here too. We'll stop Brad's video. Okay, thank you. So I got to put this to. We got to unmute you, Karen, just so you can take the screen. There you go. We're all set. And I'm going to see if I can pin you to this, and you should be good to go. I am going to just leave mine on for just a little bit. How's your audio, Karen? Are you back with us?
Can you hear
Yep.
me okay?
We can hear you just fine. And then when you speak, then you get that too. So welcome to, as I share my first screen number 1, to Manuscript Monday, which is sponsored by the Manuscript Society. We are delighted to have you here. And our special guest is Dr. Linn Femia, who is with the Library of Congress. She's with the Manuscript Division. She is something else. And let me tell you, we're going to have a great time tonight with a very interesting program, as they all are. But I'm really excited about this one. Thanks to Carolyn Sung on the Manuscript Society Board of Trustees for connecting us. And we'll tell you a little about what's going to happen. We're going to do this in under an hour. Who is the sponsor? The Manuscript Society is always the sponsor. Why a webinar? Well, it's the best place for us and the best way for us to reach as many members and non-members as we possibly can. Again, the Manuscript Society is here to share information about manuscripts, historical documents, preservation, and care. That's part of our mission. My name is Brian Cathanis. I'm your host. I am a member of the Manuscript Society and a former trustee, and I get the honor of doing Manuscript Mondays and kind of hosting these webinars. Why now? Why not? Great time. We try to do it the first Monday of every month. If there's a holiday, then we do it on a Tuesday. So we're not have to give up our Labor Day or our Memorial Day or our typical Monday holidays. Who was invited? We invited all our Manuscript Society members. I've invited members from the International Society of Appraisers and other appraisal organizations. We reached out to the Society of American Archivists and some of our board members and editors like Brad Cook and Pat Vaccaro have their own lists, and they'll share that with our list. I would hope that you would share with your email and your friends on your social media and on your regular email about things that are coming up, and we'll tell you how you can learn more about it. What are we going to cover? We're going to talk about that and where to get more information. We're going to talk about that soon. I won't read this whole thing because y'all know how to read. Karen, you can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
Okay, good deal. I'll just give you the intro. Warren G. Harding, Carrie Fulton Phillips Correspondence, a tangled tale of ownership rights, romance, and archival ethics, and probably some intrigue and sex and all that great stuff we'd like to watch on a Monday night. So with that, I'll give you a minute just to read the introduction, and then I'll introduce our speaker for the evening. And that, my friends, is just the beginning. Let me tell you about our speaker. Dr. Linn Femia is an archivist for the Harding Phillips papers. She's been processing archivist for the preparation section of the Manuscript Division since 1991. She was in this when she was just a child. Previous to that, she earned a PhD in ethnomusicology, which is, once you figure it out, you know what it is, but I wouldn't have a clue, from Brown University. My economics professor in college was from Brown University.
Oh,
He
okay.
he kept a wrinkled shirt in his bottom drawer and put it on every morning. I don't know where he slept, but he put that wrinkled shirt on. Karen does not do that. She's in great shape here, and we're going to make sure this goes really well. She received the fellowship at the Smithsonian and went on and took a contract position as an archivist. She also wrote a book. Tell us a copy of the book, the title of the book again.
That half barbaric twang, the banjo in American popular culture.
And as a banjo player and all the people that hate my banjo playing, they will love that title. So if you like the banjo and that horrible twang, I suggest you go out and grab that book too. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Karen. I'm going to undo my screen here so that you can do your screen. Once I figure out, I'm going to stop my screen sharing, and I'm going to make you
I hit
the
share screen.
host. I'm going to make you the host.
These are the letters. Oh, okay. However, rogue copies of the letters were leaked. More on that later. I first started working in the manuscript division in 1991, and I distinctly remember being told my first week about this collection. And we have Harding's love letters, I was told. And they weren't written to his wife, but they're completely closed, even to staff, and will not be open for so many years that probably none of us will be here to see it. Well, the entirety of this collection, all of it, mostly letters, some draft letters, some released other related material, came from one place. The letters were discovered in 1956 in a box, hidden in a closet, found by a court-appointed lawyer named Williamson, whose job it was to move an 82-year-old woman out of her rundown home in Marion, Ohio, and into a nursing home. The woman, Carrie Fulton Phillips, over the years had become a bit of a town eccentric, living in a house full of German Shepherd dogs, which she raised. When the lawyer opened the box at the back of the old woman's closet, he discovered a stash of letters from Warren Harding, dating from 1910 to 1920. Not knowing what to do with the letters, he took them home for safekeeping. And there they sat for 5 years, even after Phillips' death in 1960, kind of a ticking time bomb. To understand what happened to those letters and when their existence became known outside of Marion, Ohio in 1963, we need to understand the larger issue of Harding's presidential papers. So it's time to back up the story to 1921. Next slide. In 1921, Warren Harding's presidential inauguration day. Reporters noted the contrast between the obviously ailing Woodrow Wilson, who is pale and in a wheelchair, and the ruddy-faced Harding bounding up the Capitol steps. Although they took his rosy cheeks to be a sign of health, it was probably the result of his dangerously high blood pressure. Ironically, Wilson would outlive Harding by 6 months. While on a demanding tour of the West in August 1923, Harding died from heart disease in a hotel in San Francisco. When Harding died, the scandals of Teapot Dome had not yet come out, nor any news of marital infidelities. Harding was a very popular president at that time. When Florence Harding returned to Washington, she needed to move out of the White House quickly to make room for the Coolidges. In the process of packing and clearing things away, Florence began to burn some papers. Later, rumor had it that Florence burned lots and lots of papers. Many thought she'd burned the papers because she wanted to protect her husband's legacy. She even told several people that she'd burned all the papers and thus created the impression that there was scandals to be hidden and also that there would be no Harding presidential papers. In fact, substantial Harding papers did survive, and it's still unclear what exactly Florence burned. And for the papers that remained, no one would be allowed to see them for 40 years, not until 1963. Next slide. Florence Harding died only 16 months after her husband, and in her will, she left all papers to the Harding Memorial Association. The association was based in their hometown of Marion, Ohio. Next slide. And that association was controlled completely and totally by the Sawyers. First, the father, Dr. Charles Sawyer, who you see seated at the table here, and then later by his son. They were both doctors from Marion, Ohio. The elder Sawyer had been Harding's personal physician. Not long after the death of Harding, the scandals of his administration began to break, and the Hometown Memorial Association went on the defensive. Next slide. The Sawyers were rumored over the years to be sorting through and destroying documents that they had thought would hurt the Harding legacy. No scholars were allowed access. But finally, 40 years later, in 1963, the aging Dr. Carl Sawyer, the son, decided to donate the papers to the Ohio Historical Society. With the news that the Harding papers would finally be open for research, a number of historians became interested in doing Harding research. This is why, in October of 1963, Francis Russell, a writer of popular history books and a contributing editor at American Heritage Magazine, drove into Marion, Ohio, looking for local stories about Harding. It didn't take him long to find out that a lawyer in town named Williamson had a box full of Harding love letters. Next slide. This is why, so when Russell went to Williamson's home, he was invited to read the letters. Russell, who planned to write a book focused on the scandals of Warren Harding, was astonished and surely delighted when he sorted through the documents. Russell was fully aware of the Harding Memorial Association's reputation as a document destroyer, and he feared that they would somehow get their hands on the letters and set a match to them. Russell offered to contact the Ohio Historical Society. Yes, Dr. Sawyer from the Harding Memorial Association had finally decided to send the papers to Ohio Historical Society, but it was not a done deal. Russell revealed his find to a young archivist at the Ohio Historical Society named Kenneth Duckett. Next slide. Yes, he's the author of the 1975 textbook, Modern Manuscripts, but he's just a young beginning archivist at this time. Russell brought Duckett to Marion, Ohio to review the Harding Phillips correspondence. Without establishing who actually owned the letters, the lawyer, Williamson, signed a gift agreement donating the letters to the Ohio Historical Society. Russell and Duckett brought the letters back to Ohio Historical Society and went through them together, dating, sorting, chronologizing. At this point in time, only part of the Harding letters had been delivered to the Ohio Historical Society. And when they arrived in early October 1963, Sawyer had insisted that the transport have a highly publicized police escort to protect them from possible Teapot Dome thugs. Duckett feared that if Sawyer learned of the acquisition of the Phillips letters, he would end his dealings with the Historical Society and refuse to send the rest of the Harding papers. And Duckett was also keenly aware of the Memorial Association's reputation for censorship and destruction. We need to keep in mind, however, that the Harding papers that ended up at the Ohio Historical Society filled 800 boxes, and the Harding Phillips correspondence is only 2 boxes. So the real prize was the papers that Sawyer held, but the Phillips correspondence was explosive in nature. So Duckett decided to keep the letters secret, not only from the public, but from his supervisors as well. And then Duckett decided to secretly microfilm the letters in the basement vault so no one would know. He planned to send the microfilm copies to various safe locations around the country, beyond the reach of destruction. Eventually, he sent 3 copies to various friends and 1 copy to American Heritage Magazine. It was not until the following spring in 1964 that Duckett's supervisors and the board members became aware of the Phillips letters, but only the letters, not the microfilm, which Duckett still kept secret. Needless to say, they were quite unhappy. Meanwhile, several Harding researchers who had camped out at Ohio Historical Society for the opening of the Harding papers, they'd been allowed to see some of the Phillips letters. So, of course, word leaked out. Next slide. On July 10th of 1964, a front page headline in the New York Times read, "Love letters from Harding to Ohio merchant's wife found." Well, the news was out. And now the Harding family, the heirs and the owners of Harding's copyright, were aware of the letters. And finally, Isabel Phillips Mattei, the only child of Carrie Fulton Phillips, would be drawn into the story. Next slide. The scandal of the Phillips letters had come to overshadow the opening of the Harding papers. This was not what the Ohio Historical Society had wanted. Some board members wanted to destroy the letters, but cooler heads prevailed. Instead, they contacted the Marion County probate judge, Edward Russo, and the papers were transferred to the probate court as part of the Carrie Fulton Phillips estate. Phillips died in debt, and if the letters had monetary value, they would be sold to pay off her debts. In July 29, 1964, Judge Russo ordered the Harding Phillips letters sealed, and at the same time, the Harding family filed a lawsuit claiming damages from Russell, Duckett, American Heritage, McGraw-Hill, which was Russell's book publisher, and the New York Times, which had used quotes from the letters provided by Russell. Around this time, the Ohio Historical Society realized that Duckett had produced microfilm copies of the letters and demanded that the microfilm reels be turned over, but Duckett refused. So the legal maneuvers continued from 1964 until 1971. But before the final settlement papers were signed in 71, Francis Russell published his 1968 best-selling book, The Shadow of Blooming Grove, a biography of Harding almost entirely focused on one scandal or another. The sections concerning his affair with Carrie Phillips show where he would have quoted the letters if the court order had not prevented him, by having passages with quotation marks around just a set of dashes. The controversy helped sell the book. Kenneth Duckett left Ohio Historical Society with their blessing and took a job in Illinois. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. A simplified explanation of the final 1971 settlement is that Isabel Phillips Matei accepted the ownership of the letters in 1965 and was able to pay off the debts of the estate when the Harding family purchased the possessory rights to the collection. The Hardings received $10,000 from American Heritage for the purchase. The Harding family now owned the possessory rights to the entire collection and the common law copyright to the letters written by Harding, which is by far most of the collection. Both the Hardings and the Matei families wanted the letters to remain sealed, and the purchase by the Hardings was made with this mutual understanding. The settlement agreement included a 50-year closure, as well as the Harding family donation of the letters to the Library of Congress. Next slide. Duckett had admitted to making 4 microfilm copies of the letters. Only a handful of items did not get copied. Those copies had been dispersed to friends and one to American Heritage. They were gathered up as part of the agreement. One went to the Harding family, and the other 3 were ordered to go to the Ohio Historical Society with the same 50-year closure. On July 29th, 2014, the 50 years was over. Now, about the broke copies and the leaked quotes that I mentioned earlier. First, the New York Times quotes that appeared in 1964 had been requoted many times. Also, there were copies of some letters made by Harding researcher Dean Albertson while the letters were still in Ohio, and he placed them in with his other papers at UMass Amherst, but added the 50-year restriction to his copies. Russell left his notes and a few transcriptions at the American Heritage Center in Laramie, Wyoming. There was, however, one rogue copy of the microfilm. Apparently, Duckett kept one copy of the microfilm squirreled away, and he neglected to mention it to the judge. He donated his papers in 2003 to Western Reserve Historical Society in Cleveland, Ohio. His papers consist of 2 boxes of items strictly dealing with the Harding-Phillips controversy, and as a bonus, he threw in his own copy of the microfilm. His papers were restricted permission of the donor needed. Permission was apparently granted to a local lawyer, James Robinault, who had written a previous book on Ohio history. In 2009, Robinault published a book called The Harding Affair, Love and Espionage During the Great War, based largely on the microfilm. And yes, espionage. Many of the letters date from the run-up to and during World War I. Next slide. Carrie Phillips had lived for several years in Germany while her daughter attended boarding school there. and Carrie held definite pro-German sympathies, which she freely shared with many, including Senator Harding, who would be voting on the US declaration of war. Mr. Robinault found some evidence of Carrie Phillips being a spy for Germany, and in his book, he's quite convinced of it. I myself am not convinced. To be fair, the idea that Carrie was a spy for Germany is not an idea concocted by Mr. Robinault. It was an idea actively investigated by the American Protective League, Bureau of Investigation, and Military Intelligence. While preparing this collection, I took a day for research at the National Archives, and I found correspondence from military intelligence to then Senator Harding, asking about his neighbor, Mrs. Phillips, and her pro-German sympathies. They had no idea that the two were having an affair. Harding replied to military intelligence that Carrie, quote, is imprudent in her criticism. The very openness of it would seem to establish its innocuous character. In other words, if she were a spy, she wouldn't talk like that. And I found no evidence that she, thanks for the laugh. I found no evidence that she did more than talk too much. However, World War I was a bad time for freedom of speech. Many people were investigated and even incarcerated for their expressions of opposition to the war. Carrie was certainly at risk. Harding recognized the danger and he tried to warn her. Next slide. Here's Harding's letter to Phillips, February 17, 1918, written after he had received the letter from military intelligence. And the next slide, we will zoom in on this little bit and try to read his handwriting. So the next slide. Can you bring the, oh yeah, that's good, that works. Starting halfway over on the top line, I'll read it. Let me lecture you a bit. It is quite all right for you to express yourself freely on war matters to me. This does not say you are right, but there is no harm in free expression to me. I can understand, but do, please, I beg you, be prudent in talking to others. If things go as you have foreseen in this serene aftermath, you will have your consolation. Remember, your country is in war. Things are not normal, and toleration is not universal, and justice is not always discriminating. In 1921, then President Harding pardoned Eugene Debs, releasing him from prison. Debs had been convicted of violating the Espionage Act due to his vocal opposition to World War I. Even invited him to come visit in the White House after being released from prison. I have wondered if Harding felt the need to pardon Debs because of his experience knowing that Carrie Phillips had been at risk of arrest. Next slide. It's hard to read that, but it's a page of code words that they try to use in letters. They didn't actually use very many of them. Some of them they used, but of course, so the Harding-Phillips letters as a whole relate the story of an extramarital love affair, one using secret code words. And we can go to the next slide. Oops. Yeah, maybe you can make that smaller so we can see it. There we go. And one with complicated travel plans. And you can see Pootersons will be glad to meet you. Yeah, he's using fake names, and there's some other letters with some spicy talk, but I'm not putting those up for you, sorry. You can go look at them online though. And by the end, there's a lot of bickering in the letters and fights. Next slide. This is this very sweet letter. This is the very first letter in the collection, dating 5 years into their 15-year relationship. By the end of the collection, it's like watching a bad marriage break apart. There was clearly a strong physical and emotional relationship, especially in the early years. Very few of us would be happy to have our most intimate conversations made public record. Fortunately, there's more to the letters than simple love letters. There are discussions of party politics, Senate votes on prohibition, the vote on the declaration of war, issues of free speech during wartime, national security risks that can result from the personal secrets of our political leaders. Carrie Phillips had a lot of opinions, and they talked politics a lot, besides in addition to the basic love letter type thing. So looking at the story of both the Harding-Phillips correspondence and the Harding papers, it seems that Harding's reputation suffered perhaps more than it should have over the years from the lack of primary research material. Misunderstandings and untruths have been repeated so many times by both popular writers and scholars, with these papers closed for so many years, as well as the saga of the Harding papers that finally went to Ohio Historical Society. Untruths just continued through a chain of citations leading back to the same gossip-ridden sources. In recent years, there has been some revisionist thinking about Harding, and I think it's fair to say historians don't list Harding as our worst president anymore. Next slide. If you want more on this topic, if I've piqued your interest, you can watch the panel discussion from the opening of the papers in 2014. To the far left is Robinault, who was the author of the book that we talked about. Then it's Dr. Hudson, who is chief of a manuscript division. There's me. And then next to me is one of the great nephew of Warren Harding, Charles, is it Charles? I can't remember, but someone. And then hiding in the audience were two of Carrie Phillips, were her grandson and great granddaughter. And they didn't want anybody to know they were there because they didn't want to have to deal with the press. But I gave them a little tour, and then they just sat in the back and watched. And then they were pleased enough with it that they sent that small batch of papers that we've seen some items from. So next slide. All the documents in the collection have been digitized, and you can find them here. You can just go to Google and search Library of Congress, Harding Phillips, and you'll get to it. You'll get to this. The arrow at the bottom, if you see the blue arrow, if you go up, which I added, that points to where, if you want to get to the finding aid, that's the link. You click on that and you'll get to the finding aid. And the next slide. If you're seriously looking for specific documents, it's much easier to find things from the finding aid because you go through it, the container list, and it has a link to every image from the container list or every folder, and then you can go through. So it's easier than so thank you for listening. I really enjoyed being able to go back and look at this collection, and it was kind of exciting, the whole procedure.
It's fascinating, and I'm so grateful that you were able to join us tonight. This is just incredible. We got a little time to open it up for some questions. Would that be all right, Karen?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. All right, so here's how we're going to do this. Again, this is not normally how we do this, but in the chat mode here, let's look for a spot. Invite, copy the link. Let's put this all up. You can type in some show chat. Hold on, I'll get this in here, and we're gonna, if you have a question, you can type it right into the chat mode there, and Karen will see it and I'll see it, and we'll be able to share back and forth, and I'm sure she'll happy to answer your question. Or
Well,
just type in your name and I will undo your and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question live. Karen, did you say something there?
Well, I just see that. I never thought about it, but I don't know if she's related to Robert Fulton, who the steamboat. Although my husband went to Robert Fulton Elementary School in New Jersey, so
oh, that was Roger's
I
question.
should have looked.
Okay.
I should have looked for that. I should have thought.
I don't know. That's a good question. Other questions or thoughts? Just type them right in there in the chat. There's a little chat section on the bottom there. You can see that, and you can put that in there. So did you read a lot of these letters? Go ahead.
Yeah, normally when you do a collection, you just don't have the time to read everything. But they pulled me aside. I wasn't supposed to even tell anybody I was working on the papers, and then they let me have a lot of time because they wanted to make sure that things were dated properly. There was, if you look at the papers online, you'll see sometimes in little brackets a date, and that's the ones that Duckett and Russell put on. And sometimes I found that they didn't have it right, and I would put my date in parentheses. I had the advantage of being able to go online and search things like, and like, I could read, and he'd talk about, oh, I did a recording today of a patriotic speech. And so then I could go and look up when he made a recording of a patriotic speech. And then I
Oh,
found
I see.
it was the wrong year. And, or one, there was a postcard that she was going to send, but then she ended up keeping, and she was in Europe she was in Europe at the time. And she's writing down the back that, a message to him. I got your mail, and here I am. And she was with a bunch of women, and there's all these pigeons on the ground. And I'm trying to figure out now if I knew when she had traveled where, if
Mhm.
I could figure out where she was, I could date it. And then it just occurred to me, oh, she's in Venice. It's in front of the
Oh,
thing.
isn't
And
that
then I
wild?
looked at the particular statue behind her, and I matched it up with the cathedral. And
Oh, that's
you know,
great.
so I had to do little
Yeah.
things like that.
So you had to
And
do some reading
also,
too.
I could go online and get, the lists of passengers on boats. Because when she was in Germany, she would get on a boat, and they would meet. And she would come over so they could have a little weekend together. And then she'd take the ship back. But it was easy to check for her name on
Oh,
the
that's
ship
great.
manifest.
Good
And
deal.
I could
Brad
date-
has a question. Brad, I'm gonna try to unmute you. Can you unmute and ask your question?
Oh.
Which I see you posted up there.
Sure.
You got
Oh.
the floor, buddy.
Can you hear me?
We
Yeah.
can.
Okay, well, I had just asked, I said, since this collection has surfaced, air quotation marks around surfaced, have others come forward with any other letters or documents that were not part of the original collection?
Well, the Phillips family sent some stuff. They sent like that beautiful picture of her with her daughter. That's from them.
Mhm.
And the news articles were from their papers too. They also had a document in they weren't happy with Robinault's book when deciding that Carrie and by extension Isabel was helping to be a German spy. They didn't like that too much. So that's another reason they didn't really want to be. They didn't want to have to talk to him. But they had a written statement from Isabel that she apparently claimed to have had no idea that her mother was having an affair with Warren Harding. He was just the friendly neighbor as far as she ever knew. So, but there's nothing else other than that I know of. Of course, there was the other affair, the one that he had while he was in the White House with the young woman who wrote the book. Why can't I think of her name now? The president's daughter, and she wrote a book and made a lot of money off of it. And people doubted that was actually his, but apparently the DNA tests came out after this. One of Harding's relatives was willing to do a DNA test,
Wow.
So yeah, so after he broke up with Carrie, he had an affair with actually a much younger woman.
Too many
Well, he
affairs to
had-
keep track
I
of.
think
Isn't that
maybe
wild?
had less opinions. Might have been a little easier for him to.
Jeez. Thanks, Brad. Great question. Got a few more, Marguerite, Al, and we're going to go to Dean. Dean, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself there. Brad, I'm going to mute you, and Dean, you have the floor. Still got you, Dean? You are unmuted, but we don't hear you. Oh, maybe you muted yourself again. There you go. Try unmuting again. And if not, I'm just going to read your question. There you go. Try now. I see you're off. Nope, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. So I will read your question, and so everybody can see it. I got training at the Library Archives Institute at Ohio Historical Society in July of 1974, and the staff were still talking about the Harding issue. Ken was a good friend. He was at Southern Illinois University. I was at Sangamon State. Now you of Springfield, both of us archivists. Ken said he was indeed very afraid of the loss of the papers, which is why the microfilm and sending it to other places. I have 2 copies of Russell book. Did you mention that the quotes from the letters were replaced by hyphenated slugs?
Yeah, I did mention that, and that is kind of interesting. And the whole Ken Duckett choice of what to do, that's where the archival ethics, I mean, I don't even know what I think myself. I mean, because they were destroying things, and the Harding Association really was going through, but on the other hand, sort of secretly microfilming and sending it around. I don't know, but he did preserve it. So
That's
he
great.
made sure that they didn't get destroyed.
Good deal. Good point there, Dean. Thank you so much. Al Ottens, I'm going to unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself so you can ask your question, please. There you go, Al. You should be good. I don't hear you, Al. Bump, 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 bump. We have you as unmuted.
I could just, do you want me to just read it, or?
Yeah, I'll read it and then you can respond.
Okay.
What did Harding's wife and family make of all of the clandestine romance? With 2 question marks from Al Ottens, by the way.
Actually, there was a lot of Harding family that came to the that panel discussion. They were sitting in the front row. They seemed to be enjoying the attention, and I think they were perfectly aware. At one point, I do remember, which I think is true. I don't think Harding ever had any intention of leaving Florence. At some points in the letters, she's upset because she thinks he's going to leave Florence and be with her, and I don't think he ever was going to do that. For one thing, I think Florence was the one that got him started in the newspaper business, and she kind of had a good business mind. But she was kind of sickly. So, yeah, so I don't think he was ever, and when I said that, I could see they all kind of smiled like, oh no, he was never going to leave Florence. So I think maybe Florence was their hero.
There you go. Marguerite, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and we'll see if you can get your mic working so you can ask your question. Again, if not, I'll be happy to read it. It's for everyone to see.
Yeah,
there you go.
I hope that, I mean, I stepped in a little bit late, so I hope I'm not asking a question that you already covered, but I was just kind of curious to know that if any of the letters that she had written to him actually survived. And also it's kind of interesting when this all came out, did anyone come forward to say that they had known about this relationship and had any details about anything?
No, it seems like they kept it kind of quiet. First of all, there's drafts. It's the letters where she's really mad and upset about something, mostly about the war. She was even getting close to, I mean, she was saying like she might expose their relationship if he were to vote for going into war with Germany. So she was kind of started on the edge of blackmailing, but he just wrote back and he said, go ahead, expose me. I mean, I'm going to vote the way I want to vote. So he did the right thing in that, in that regard, at least.
Yeah, for sure.
But she kept it a total secret. Nobody knew, it seems like.
Wow.
And I don't think anybody came forward and said that they knew about it. It was really kept a secret.
Follow-up question,
so the letters,
Marguerite?
So the drafts that,
Actually,
so there are some draft notes that of hers that when she's like working on the letter, and then she wrote a proper letter and sent it, but she kept her draft notes. That's all we have. And he would often write, I assume you're burning these letters. Please burn them because, you know, you don't want these to be found. I'm burning my letters. So he burned her letters. But she was obviously.
I'm surprised with hard copy that, and with the mail being delivered and who knows who hand touched what or sees what kind. It's just shocking that no one knew about it at any point.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Lots of times there'd be a front letter, which was meant to be for her and her husband. And then underneath it, you assume she'd get to the mail first, and then she'd take the letter that was meant just for her out of there. And then because otherwise the postman might say, oh, I see you got a letter from Warren. Right. So there would be like a front letter. And then a lot of the time she was in Germany or traveling around Europe. And there were other times when they're traveling too. And lots of telegrams like meeting up at this hotel and that hotel or something. So, yeah, I sort of think that he finally kind of must have known about it because, and then she sort of spent him into bankruptcy, and I think her husband ended up a kind of sad alcoholic bankrupt guy in the end. So my guess is he probably figured it out.
Probably
I don't
figured
know.
it out. That's good. David has his hand raised. Where is David? That just popped up here. Where are we, David? Where are you? There you are, David. I'm going to unmute you. And ask you to unmute yourself there, and then you'll have the floor. I just give you the okay to unmute. I don't know if you can do that or not.
Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me?
We got you. We go ahead.
So the Skirballs had a letter about Mr. Phillips. Actually, it was a letter from Harding trying to, what shall we say? It was a late letter, like a 1920 letter, trying to sort of paper over this terrible relationship. So he must have known it. And the other thing is, I had a big Harding collection that I donated to Ohio, and there's the complimentary stuff all about Nan Britton. I had a lot of her
Oh,
stuff.
Nan Britton, thank you.
So anyway, if anybody's interested, there's that.
So that's at that stuff's all at Ohio Historical Society.
Yeah.
And what's the name of the collection that it's in?
Well,
Or is it
I'm
just part of
Dave.
the Harding? Yeah, you probably just asked for it.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I had it was actually from her grandchildren. They about 10, 15 years ago, they cut it up and it went on the market, and bits of it went here and there, but I got a lot of it, and it's now in Ohio.
Huh,
Great. Wow.
fascinating.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Good deal. Thank you so much.
And
That's
thank
great.
you for jogging my memory. Nan Britton, the
Yeah,
young woman afterwards.
Michael Renard asked, what happened to the daughter of Nan and Warren Harding? Interesting enough that that question comes up at the same time.
I don't know. Maybe somebody, our last speaker, maybe he knows.
Yeah, she lived to be like 98. I think she lived long enough to know about the DNA results, although I'm not sure about that. The family was in Oregon. But yeah, she married, and actually, like I say, she had issue, as I say, and so I think they're grandchildren.
Wow.
somewhere.
Good deal. Thank you. Appreciate
If
that.
they contact the rest of the Harding clan. People doubted it because he and Florence never had any children, and then Phillips never. I mean, she just had Isabel from before with her husband, and she never. But then, so people thought, well, maybe he just,
Sure.
But then this Nan Britton's daughter turned out to be his Harding offspring.
Got it. Good deal. So Dean just wraps up with, I think it was early in the archival process, and many archivists at the time didn't have the leadership or understanding how to handle some of those controversial materials. So I guess we learn as we go. I guess we're still learning, huh?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic in general. That would be
especially today.
Yeah.
or most recently as to what's going on with everything. Good deal. So with that, Karen, let me just do a couple of things here, and then we'll sign off if that's okay. Zoom webinars with the typo and everything are on the way. We're going to try things a little bit differently. This was a very bizarre month, and I apologize, Karen. Thanks. I will clean up the recording so that we take out all that stuff, and I will take full responsibility and blame for anything that didn't work out quite right. But this has been a fascinating topic. We're going to post this webinar on the Manuscript Society website, along with all our other Manuscript Mondays. Want to thank certainly thank Dr. Karen Femia for being here with us and giving us this great presentation. Want to thank the Board of Trustees of the Manuscript Society, and certainly everybody that joined in tonight to not only ask questions, but to be part of this too. Share this with everybody you know. Next things to think about are, come on, let's go down here. What's coming up in November is the Tile Club, tile creations of famous artists. Dr. Stuart Embry is going to be our speaker. And in December, Alfred Lemon will talk about Spanish Louisiana. You can become a member of the Manuscript Society right now or anytime go to manuscript.org, no S on that, manuscript.org. That's where you'll find a lot of information on collecting manuscripts, caring for manuscripts, Manuscript Society conferences and events and things that are going on, and some of the Manuscript Society Mondays that are going on. We kind of covered our questions. Wanted to thank you for coming tonight. Karen, anything to wrap up with before we call it a night?
Just thank you. I enjoyed doing this very much, and I'm also thankful to the people who are saying that they enjoyed it. So it's
It was great. Next time we'll take
a little
the
bumpy start, but I
we'll-
think it worked out.
we'll unmute everybody so you can have the appropriate time for laughter and audience response, because you had some really clever parts tonight. That's the one part about webinars. You just don't get that. You just
Yeah.
don't get that interaction that you would hope to get. So, all right. We got a lot of people say great presentation and thank you and all that stuff. And I
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thank
Look at that.
Thank you, Carolyn.
you.
And we will chat with you all soon. Have a good
Okay.
night. We'll see you next month on Manuscript Monday. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Have a good
Okay.
night, y'all.
Bye-bye,
Take care.
Brian.